So I just finished the book, The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor, and it was a really good read. And I thought I'd give you guys a quick summary and a review of the book. Okay, so I really enjoyed the book. Out of 10 stars, I'd probably give it about an 8 star. It did take a little bit of time to get the book started with the introduction and the discovering the happiness advantage chapter. But once you start getting into the actual methods of being happy, it starts getting really good and really exciting. The next chapter is called Change is Possible, and it mostly focuses on how our brains are very malleable. And you know the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks? They've proven that this isn't true. You can always change the way you see the world and the way your brain works. One of the examples that they use in the book is the 4-minute mile. For a long time it was thought that you cannot physically run a mile in under 4 minutes. But as soon as one person broke that 4-minute mark, a bunch of other people started being able to do it afterwards. So the limitations that we put on ourselves, we can break through them and we can actually go beyond and go further.
Plus Ultra!
The next chapter, which is called The Happiness Advantage, really starts to get into the 7 principles that the author is trying to teach you to start following. Of course, the author cites a bunch of research and studies, but the big summary of it is being happier just makes you better at everything. He uses an example of giving doctors candy before they go do a diagnosis makes the diagnosis more accurate, and they make it a lot quicker than doctors who did not get a little happiness boost before it. Another great thing in this chapter is he literally gives you an outline of how to have a happier mindset, and I'm actually going to read those off real fast. He says, meditate, find something to look forward to, commit to an act of conscious kindness, have a positive environment, so having photos around your desk, exercise, spend money on experiences, and use your strengths. So on Use Your Strengths, you can actually find out what you're good at, and you can use these throughout your day, and it actually makes you feel happier and better about yourself. And then the next chapter in the book is called Fulcrum and Lever. And this chapter is mostly about changing your mindset, changes what is possible for you. It's the idea that if you have a seesaw and one person is heavier than the other person, the lighter person's not really going to be able to do much. It's going to mostly depend on the heavier person. But if you move the heavier person closer to the fulcrum, then the lighter person now has more power to lift up the heavier person. And the whole idea is depending on how big the lever is and depending on where you move your fulcrum, you can basically do anything. You can lift anything. Another really interesting part of this chapter is how it mentions you can have a job, a career, or a calling. And depending on which one you call what you do, it can make a big difference in your life. So if you consider working at Taco Bell as just a job, then you're going to look at it very negatively. It's just a way that you make money and you just go there, you do the job, and you get paid, and that's all it is. If you consider it a career, then that means that you're going to work a little harder, you're going to try and have a more positive outlook, and you're going to be trying to get higher in that system. And then the last one is seeing it as your calling. So if you see working at a fast food restaurant as your calling, then you're going to do everything you can to try and get as much as you can out of that job. You're going to try and interact with people, you're going to try and make your employees happier, you're going to try and make the best food that you can. And how we become more happy is seeing our jobs as our calling. Even if we don't want to do that for the rest of our life, the outlook that we have on those callings makes a big difference. The next chapter is called The Tetris Effect. It talks about how when we train ourselves to think negatively on a daily basis, we set ourselves up to fail. The book talks about how it takes a lot of practice to start seeing the good in every situation. But we have to try and change our outlook on the world and try to see things in a more positive light. The next chapter is actually my favorite chapter. It talks about falling up. So basically taking the downward momentum you have from failing and using it to go back up, like a roller coaster. This chapter talks about post-traumatic growth, which is similar to post-traumatic stress, but it's where after the bad situation that happens to you, you try and find the good out of things. One of the examples that they use in the book is when someone gets cancer. So let's say a woman gets breast cancer, and as she's, going through this hard time, she notices the community around her, and she really starts appreciating life. Well, when she pulls through that traumatic experience, she's able to see the world in a much more positive way. Another really interesting part of the chapter talks about learned helplessness, which is basically when you find out that something goes wrong in your life, and you just automatically assume that it's never going to get better. You assume that you have no control over everything, and it's just always going to be that terrible. And when this happens to us, it just puts us in a downward spiral that's really hard to get out of. And a way that we can combat this is to have hope. Things might be bad right now, but that doesn't mean they always have to be bad. Okay, so my absolute favorite part of the book is in this chapter, and I'm just going to read it for you guys because I wouldn't be able to do it justice. So it says, "You've probably heard of the oft-told story of the two shoe salesmen who were sent to Africa in the early 1900s to assess opportunities. They wired separate telegrams back to their boss. One read, 'Situation hopeless, they don't wear shoes.' The other read, 'Glorious opportunity, they don't have any shoes yet.'" Oh, where you walking, we'll go. I'm trying to shoot a video, and I would appreciate it if you stopped. The next chapter is called the Zorro Circle. And the Zorro Circle basically talks about how we don't have control over everything in our life, but if we can draw a small circle around the things that we do have control over, it can help give us more confidence and help us not feel so overwhelmed. The next chapter is called the 20-second rule. And the 20-second rule talks about how if you make things more inconvenient to do, then you're less likely to do them. If you make them very convenient to do, you're probably going to do them. So we can use this to form good habits and bad habits. The author talks about how motivation is a limited resource, and as we go throughout our day, our motivation starts to drop and drop more. Decision making is also one of those things that depletes throughout the day, and I've actually read a little bit about this in other books. It's called like decision fatigue, I think, and it basically talks about how the more decisions you have to make in the day, the more lazy you're going to be with deciding on those things. So the author uses an example of when he gets home after a long day of work, he'll sit down on the couch, he'll take the remote and flip on the TV. So what he does to counter this is he takes the batteries out of his remote and he puts it in a drawer in another room. So now he has to get up, go get the batteries, put them in the remote, and turn on the TV. So he's going to be way less likely to do this because it takes a lot more effort to do it now. And instead he puts a book right next to where he sits when he gets home. So now he's not going to turn on the TV, but he's more likely to pick up the book and start reading the book instead. He also recommends sleeping in your workout clothes. I'm sorry if I made you guys a little nervous when I showed my muscles. Lastly, in this chapter, he talks about making rules for yourself. So if you no longer have to make decisions because you've already pre-made your decision with these rules, then you'll have less decision fatigue throughout the day. And the last of the 7 principles is social investment. I'm sure you guys have heard the saying, joy shared is double the joy, pain shared is half the pain. And the book in this chapter uses evidence to prove that. When we find ourselves in times of trouble, we usually try to be alone, which is the opposite of what we should be doing. The book then talks about high quality connections. It talks about how we don't want those shallow relationships with people, we want those nice, deep relationships with people. Friendships where, you make each other better people by being around each other, where you encourage each other and pull each other up instead of bringing each other down. So yeah, that's the book. It was about, I think it was like 210 pages, and then there's some references in the back and stuff like that, but it was overall like a really good read. And I got a lot out of it. Y'all know that my favorite chapter was the Falling Up chapter, mostly because I really loved the funny parts in it. The author was really great. I enjoyed his style of writing. He seemed to be real casual and makes it easy for people to understand. And he seems to just enjoy what he's writing, which I really enjoy seeing that in books, is when you can tell that the writer's not being fake, he's being genuine, and they just really enjoy writing what they're writing. Of course, I would recommend you guys checking out the book for yourself. You know, it's really good, and I gave you guys a summary, but there's a lot more information in here that you guys could get a lot of value out of. So this was something new that I tried, a book review video, and if you guys enjoyed it, let me know in the comments below, and I'll make some more of them. Catch you guys on the flip side.